There's a line in Oppenheimer where he's called the American Prometheus, and as grounded and haunting as this film gets, my mind never left from that Grecian comparison. But to start from the beginning, before Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan was one of my favorite directors of all time. He, in my opinion, made 4 perfect 10 out of 10 movies, and really Oppenheimer continues an absolutely generational career for Nolan, solidifying him as one of the best filmmakers of all time, in my opinion. This was also my first time watching a Nolan film in theaters because Tenet came out during the pandemic, and so that rose the stakes for Oppenheimer even higher. To put it simply, this is another Nolan masterclass. From the amazing performances to the spectacle of this film, it absolutely blew me away. Of course, stay tuned till the end of this video for my final score, but I want to start off by talking about the big rave for this film, which is the visuals. Because normally I like to umbrella all of the technical aspects into one category, but I feel like that just wouldn't do this film justice. But before we get into all of my thoughts on Oppenheimer, please let me know what you guys thought of this movie in the comments down below. But without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Again, starting with the visuals, the cinematographer for this movie was Hoyt van Hoytema, who's also worked with Nolan in the past a bunch and absolutely elevates this film. The big advertisement thing for this film is that it's like the biggest movie ever made, which is true because IMAX 70mm, which is what they shot like 99% of this movie on, is quite literally the biggest picture that you can ever get. And guess what? It looks absolutely amazing, and I have pretty much nothing but great things to say about it, but I do have one slight problem, and that is the aspect ratio changes. For context, I did watch this in regular IMAX. I'm pretty sure it's called a Xenon projector. It was not IMAX 70mm. There's like 17 in the whole country. I don't live by one. I'm not driving 5 hours to go to one, but I will say 99% of this movie was amazing. Strictly cinematography wise, this was spectacular. But my single problem came in with the fact that yes, this movie was shot on an IMAX 65mm camera, but it was also shot on a Panavision 65mm camera, which means that the aspect ratios are completely different. Now, Panavision camera, yes, it could have been stretched to an IMAX ratio, but obviously they don't want to do that. You lose a lot of quality, but in return, that does give you a bunch of aspect ratios that are changing. Now, for me personally, the exact screen that I was on, the aspect ratio, I'm pretty sure the screen was 51 feet to 72 feet or something very close to that. And so my aspect ratio for the most part was fine. The massive sequences looked absolutely gorgeous, but the reason that they can't use IMAX 65mm cameras whenever there's a close quarters conversation or something that's very up close and personal with people actually talking and stuff going through the microphone is because the IMAX camera sounds very loud. It sounds like a of all the film just rolling through as they're shooting. That is way too loud for singular conversation scenes, so those scenes they shoot on a Panavision 65mm. Now the picture itself still looks absolutely amazing, looks pristine, perfect. I mean, it's just stellar. But the aspect ratio change was very jarring, and I cannot look past that when this movie practically has no other issues. Again, that's pretty much the only like nitpick thing I have for this movie because everything else about this film is above positive. Getting back to what I loved so much about the visuals, and I'll get into this later in the video talking about the specific Trinity Test scene, but in general the visuals are so captivating in a very claustrophobic but also hectic way, in a sense that it's always very close up, and Nolan has talked about this a lot when promoting this movie, but the black and white scenes are what everyone else in the world sees Oppenheimer as, but the in color scenes are Oppenheimer's point of view, and that visual distinct style is such a great one that they chose to do, and they literally invented IMAX 70mm black and white film in order to capture a story in that way. Now, the black and white sequences in and of themselves are insanely well done in terms of the timing and the way that Nolan plays with time. Obviously, we know Tenet was confusing as hell, and Interstellar also plays with time in such a unique way, and Nolan is known for just messing with time. But this movie also messes with time, which you wouldn't really expect because it's a historical biopic. The next technical element I do have to talk about is the score, because it's Ludwig Göransson, and in my opinion, he after this movie is arguably one of the best composers right now. I mean, obviously you have Hans Zimmer and you have Michael Giacchino, and those are like the two big names, right? But my friend and I were talking about it, and what I think separates Ludwig Göransson is the fact that when you play his music, it really only matches that movie.
I felt like this movie was really pushing the boundaries in so many different fields. So I wanted to see how we can do that with music as well.
But Ludwig Göransson, from what he's done in The Mandalorian, Black Panther, Creed, and now Oppenheimer, it is just so well done, and it's super unique, and it's super just it's very close to the actual film rather than being something generically epic. Again, that's not to down on the work of Hans Zimmer and Michael Giacchino. They've made some of my favorite scores of all time, but I'm just saying Ludwig Göransson really does something unique here, and something that I feel like I don't really get with movies anymore. And even I would say Tenet didn't go as far with Ludwig Göransson as Oppenheimer does. I mean, there's this one sequence in this film where there's a low violin playing and it kind of gets to a very deep violin.
There's so much in the performance of the violin. Within seconds, you can go from something beautiful to something completely horrifying.
The way that it progresses through the scene is just absolutely haunting. It's riveting, and it really just gives you chills from the scene, from the score alone, let alone the scene itself being absurdly good. On the same note of the score, they know when not to use the score, and one of those main moments is during that first Trinity test, which is basically the whole main buildup of this movie. Like, the first 2 hours of this film are building up to the Trinity test, and I don't want to spoil it for you. It's literally history. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of glad I didn't pay attention in history class ever, because I didn't get Oppenheimer spoiled for me. Anyways, I think the Trinity test is just a testament to how amazing the filmmaking and honestly technical elements behind this movie are, because yes, the score, the visuals, everything is absolutely riveting for 99% of this movie, but that 1% where they don't use any score and it's completely silent and it subverts all expectation of what was going to happen, you feel the impact more than you could ever imagine you would. Again, I can't talk about the Trinity test too much because I don't want to spoil the visual and musical elements of it, but again, that 45-second countdown, I was like holding my chest, like I was holding onto my heart, and I was kind of it wasn't that my heart was beating really fast, it's kind of that it like stopped beating. The way that it's shot with being so close to the characters, and obviously, I mean, Nolan a lot of times did talk about how there's no CGI in this movie.
There are no CGI shots in the movie, and I think computer graphics, they're very versatile, they can do all kinds of things, but they tend to feel a bit safe. That's why they're difficult to use in horror movies. Animation tends to feel a little safe for the audience. The Trinity test ultimately, but also these early imaginings of Oppenheimer visualizing the quantum realm, they had to be threatening in some way. They had to have the bite of real world imagery. The Trinity test, for those who were there, was the most beautiful and terrifying thing simultaneously, and that's where we were headed with this film.
And that's kind of what I want to talk about as well in terms of the Trinity test, because you can kind of tell there is no CGI, because firstly, obviously, the technical element of it, like the IMAX film, they have to put it from film to digital and then actually do the VFX work and then scan it back onto film. So that's a whole different technical element of the intricacies of not having CGI and stuff like that. But you could tell that these like little sparks and the stars and all of this like combustion, all of the little things, they are real. You feel that. And Nolan in interviews has multiple times stated the importance of not using CGI at times. And honestly, I kind of thought it was pretentious until I watched this movie, and he proved this point 100%. You see, though it's not like this massive thing, the smaller moments definitely give more impact than honestly anything else could have. I've heard a lot of people say that this is like Nolan's Social Network, and I'll talk about the political drama aspect of it later in this video, but I first have to talk about the performances in this film, because this, just like Barbie, has an absolutely stacked cast. I'm going to talk about every main performance individually, but just those smaller roles, you have Rami Malek, Josh Peck, Jack Quaid, David Dastmalchian, Gary Oldman, Benny Safdie, Kenneth Branagh, and there are so many more that I still have not named. But as for these smaller performances, even like Rami Malek, for example, he's in the movie for like very little time, but he doesn't talk until the very end and ends up having such a massive impact, even though he's such a small character in the grand scheme of things. But getting to the main performances, I'm gonna kind of go from bottom to top here so I can say the best for last. But Florence Pugh, she plays the woman that Oppenheimer has an affair with. She is so amazing in this film. She's in it for a lot less than I expected, but the moments that she's in it are absolutely riveting. She is kind of this block in Oppenheimer's life they just can't seem to get past, and I love the way that Florence Pugh is used here. Again, she's not in it as much as I thought, but her impact is just unimaginable. Matt Damon is also in this film, and I thought that he was going to be in this movie less than he actually was, but the amount of time he's in this film is absolutely perfect. Honestly, I could always ask for more Matt Damon. I think he brings the perfect comedic levity to this film, because also Cillian Murphy does have the jokey moments. Obviously, they're not like super silly. It's just like stupid stuff they say in super serious situations.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero. What do you want for theory alone? 0 would be nice.
But Matt Damon really brings this type of levity and honestly human character to this film, because Oppenheimer feels like a god, and that's also a joke that's been made in this movie. But the whole American Prometheus thing, which I'll mention later in this video again, it definitely makes him feel like an elevated character, and Matt Damon is that character right next to him that kind of makes us feel for Oppenheimer in a sense, because you also see the whole US government side of it through Matt Damon's character. Next though is Emily Blunt, who plays Oppenheimer's wife, and she is phenomenal. I love Emily Blunt as an actress, and she does something that I don't really get to see from her too often, which is obviously she plays a serious character in the Quiet Place movies, but this is like a seriously just tormented and tortured character. But the way that she's able to be implemented in different aspects of Oppenheimer's life without even being in the forefront per se, she's always pushing Oppenheimer forward, which I really loved as a character. And then we have Robert Downey Jr. Now, this performance has been praised so much. Robert Downey Jr. himself even said Oppenheimer is the greatest movie that he's ever been in. I watched Zodiac. I absolutely love Robert Downey Jr. in it, but I do have to say, this is probably my favorite role that Robert Downey Jr. has ever played.
Well, here we are.
It's an atomic test.
The Russians have a bomb. We're supposed to be years ahead of them, but what were you guys doing in Los Alamos?
Also, to me, and this might just be a very dull-minded comparison for me personally, but in Zodiac, he just plays like this really arrogant journalist, and in the MCU, he's just an arrogant billionaire. You always have these like arrogant sides to Robert Downey Jr.'s character, and I feel like his like very outgoing personality works for that, but for 99% of Oppenheimer, Robert Downey Jr. is playing a character that I feel like is completely opposite of what I think of Robert Downey Jr. as, and so this character just left so much of a greater impact on me. I'm not going to get into details on the character that Robert Downey Jr. plays because I didn't know anything about his character going in, but I did the twists and the turns. They had my friend and I looking at each other in absolute disbelief. But now to get to the main performance of the film, Cillian Murphy. He is phenomenal. Believe all of the hype that you're hearing. In my opinion, he needs to be nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars. He is just so stellar. And I think, again, what works so well is that Nolan paired limitless talent with each other. Obviously, you have Ludwig Göransson, but Hoyt van Hoytema paired with Nolan, paired with Cillian Murphy. I mean, the way that they shot this film, like I said in the beginning of this video, it's claustrophobic. It's fear-inducing. And Cillian Murphy's performance of throughout the entire film exudes that. Like I said, I love the fact that this film is told in two different perspectives, and there's this one scene in the movie which I won't talk about too much, but it's right after the twist. You see this one scene from one character's point of view in black and white, and then you see the other one from Cillian Murphy's point of view, and it's the same scene, but seeing that different camera angle and seeing that camera this close to Cillian Murphy's face gives you a completely different contextualization to the entire scene, and it is phenomenal. I think Cillian Murphy also is the reason why these haunting themes work so well. Like I said, that fear exudes from his eyes so perfectly, and like I said in the very beginning of this video, Oppenheimer is called the American Prometheus, the guy that gave humans the power of war, basically. And I don't know how to describe the feeling, I guess, but through all of this film, maybe it was just the scale, maybe it was the scope and the size. When I was looking up at that screen, I kind of felt this haunting presence of like everything. I mean, everything in this movie was so devastatingly dark, but also kind of motivating. Like, yes, whenever they accomplished their dream of building the bomb, it kind of felt like a sense of accomplishment, but at the same time, deep down, you kind of felt that haunting sense that Cillian Murphy's character was feeling from the beginning. This goes hand in hand with the political aspects of this film. Many people have compared this to being basically Nolan's Social Network, and it's exactly that. I mean, obviously you have the Trinity Test stuff, but the final hour of this film is basically a political drama. I mean, there's a good chunk of the first hour where they explore the political backgrounds of Oppenheimer and then obviously the surrounding cast and stuff like that, and then he gets into working with the government and then the Trinity Test. But then after that, there's a lot of political stuff that I really just wasn't expecting. Obviously, there was a political element to it. It's about the Russians, Japan, the Soviets. It's about this big world-class thing, but at the same time, it's something that is very personal, and this thing where Oppenheimer regrets what he's made, and that leads into the political drama aspect of it, which again, I wasn't expecting, but I absolutely love. And this brings me to the final section where I want to talk about how Nolan still plays with time, but it also goes more into pacing rather than a weird conceptual thing like Tenet. Because this movie is 3 hours long. It's literally 3 hours. That is absurd, but it works. Now, firstly, I want to say I'm a big fan of 3-hour movies that are actually epic in scale, in scope, in size. For example, Babylon, Damien Chazelle gives this mind-blowing scope of Hollywood and letting us truly understand the thematic elements of everyone in that world. But another movie like Beau is Afraid, it's 3 hours long. We're following a singular character where even the side characters don't even feel that interesting. It just feels like a creative poop. Oppenheimer feels like the first thing that I mentioned. It feels like Babylon in the sense that from the beginning to the end, it's the most epic and grand scale scope story you can tell, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger in every single act, because you know that every single advancement in this film is gonna lead to more chaos, and playing with time in that sense as well, of having your main story of building the bomb, but also there's like this interrogation with Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer, as well as all of the side characters basically coming in one by one, testifying for or against him. And then on top of that, the black and white sequence following Robert Downey Jr.'s character and the whole court sequence, and then that all culminating by the end. I think the pacing is just so great because you have these three kind of distinct storylines, which obviously two of them intertwine by the end of the film, but one of them just keeps running through, and it just by the end creates this massive story that it left me so fulfilled that I kind of sat in silence when the title card Oppenheimer popped up and it said written and directed by Christopher Nolan, and the whole theater started applauding, and my chest was still racing from that ending. Oppenheimer is absolutely amazing. It's one of the best films I've seen in recent history. It's massive and it's just excruciatingly painful to watch, but also you can't turn your eyes away from the screen because it's so engaging with all these captivating performances, along with the technical elements of being shot in the biggest IMAX format of all time, one of the greatest composers and cinematographers behind this film, and honestly, one of the best directors of all time in Christopher Nolan. I'm giving Oppenheimer a 9.5 out of 10. As you guys can tell, I'm so passionate about this movie. I absolutely love it from top to bottom. This is why I go to the movies. But guys, that does wrap up all of my thoughts on Oppenheimer. Again, please let me know what you guys thought of this movie in the comments down below, and subscribe so you don't miss my Christopher Nolan movies ranked video, which will be coming out later this weekend. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.